Sorry,
you're fine.
everyone. Oh man. Okay. Well, as long as we have you for us before my connection goes out again, yeah, please just continue where you were going. I don't want to interrupt.
Sure. Where did you last hear me? Because I don't want to
I
assume
think,
that you.
yeah, when we left off, you were chatting about how it's really a skill for life, this tolerance for ambiguity.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's absolutely true. And I was mentioning just I think even during the current pandemic and having the courage to make some decisions that need to be made even in the face of uncertainty is absolutely crucial to I think life success in general, but specifically yeah to entrepreneurship. That's a constant reality. And every day I remember having this moment a few years in after we had started Color Outside and kind of waking up one morning and wishing that I was going to reach this point or feeling like I would eventually reach this threshold or this point in my journey where I all of a sudden had enough time behind me and had enough experience under my belt, and there was enough financial health in the company, and enough information that could help me sort of project future behavior of us and behavior of the marketplace, where I would all of a sudden reach this point where I'm like, you know what, like I feel confident in these decisions now, and I feel like I know what to do now. And
Mm,
I remember having this moment a few years in where all of a sudden I realized after several years of trying to reach this point of comfort that the entrepreneurial journey by its very nature is one of discomfort and one
mm,
of constant ambiguity. And for those who require certainty and require the comfort of everything being known, it's really not for them, because you never do reach that point. You never reach that point of at any point in the growth of a company where you have certainty and you're equipped with with being able to know everything that's going to happen. And so I remember just kind of trying to shift gears and saying I just need to grow comfortable with being uncomfortable and be able to make decisions in spite of that. And just because I'm at a point where I'm very uncomfortable and there's a whole lot of ambiguity, it doesn't mean I'm doing things wrong. That's just
mm,
part of the nature of the journey. And specifically to William and Mary, though, is I think my time at William and Mary really helped equip me for that, in particular the philosophy department, because you're asked to answer questions on a test and write essays about things that don't necessarily have a clear-cut answer, and you're being graded on your ability to apply critical thinking to a problem and to an issue, not unnecessarily finding the right answer or by being able to verbatim regurgitate what a teacher told you. And so
mm.
that's I think absolutely crucial. And I'm really glad it's one of the pillars of the Entrepreneurship Center, because I think it's one that prepares you for life and for starting a business.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of our alumni founders are philosophy majors. And it's crazy. I don't know. It's just a thread that runs through a lot of our guests. So it's really cool to hear and to hear your insights as to why that might be the case.
Well, we
Um,
get we got a lot of flack. I remember when I was at William and Mary, I waited tables at Barrett Seafood in Merchant
mm,
Square, right near campus. And I remember I'd be waiting tables and I'd go around, and people would sometimes make conversation at the tables, and they'd ask me what you're studying and what are you majoring in. And I'd always say philosophy. And most of the time I'd get, kind of strange looks, or they'd, almost like I was a sad puppy that they wanted to like pat my head on, like, oh, you're one of those kids. And I remember this one lady seemed particularly emboldened to give me her opinion, and when I told her, she was like, philosophy, what, who's going to hire you with a degree in that? And
yeah.
I was, I was kind of over it at that point, and I just sort of like quickly quipped back. I was like, anyone's going to hire me once they meet me. And she just kind of looked at me and moved on. And so we caught some flack when we were studying it, but I still stand by my decision to study that, and I think it was a great use of my time at William.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've heard that a lot too. So yeah, if for anybody who ever is questioned about their major, that's a great comeback you got here.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome. Very cool. I guess now I just am really curious about, you founded Color Outside, and you work sort of in this creative space at William and Mary. How do you define creativity? And, how has that intersected with your entrepreneurial endeavors? How do you bring that skill set that you used in founding to your work at William and Mary, where, it's a hundreds of years old institution and, there are a lot of ways of doing things that are traditional, but how do you bring that fresh perspective to that area?
So the question is, how do you bring kind of the fresh entrepreneurial mindset that I'm engaging with Color Outside to my work at William and Mary?
Yeah, exactly.
So, there are two very different stomping grounds, right? So, when you're starting a business, you've got kind of a blank canvas, and you can begin with an idea and you can shape it and make it into what you want within, market constraints and that sort of a thing. William and Mary is a very different environment in the sense that they're, a 300 odd, some odd year old institution, and it's, replete with history and tradition and also just politics. There's the politics of competing interests, and there's donors, and there's prospective students, and there are families of current students, and you've got faculty, and you've got staff, and you have all of these people who have a vested interest in this massive organization. And whereas you don't necessarily need to be diplomatic in an entrepreneurial space, you need to be very diplomatic at a place like William and Mary and be building bridges and not burning them everywhere that you go. And so that's really important and really key. And but I think, I'm fortunate enough to have a role at William and Mary where I'm encouraged to think creatively and to bring new ideas to the table. William and Mary, I think, for all its tradition, is very respectful of people's ideas. And I've found that as a student, I've found that as a staff member, I've found it as an entrepreneur outside the school who's looking to build relationships with the school. And, there's not always room for new ideas necessarily, but there is always room to hear new ideas. And I have never in all my years at William and Mary encountered opposition to hearing an idea or saying, that's something that we could consider. And so I think there's room at a place like William and Mary for an entrepreneurial spirit from that perspective, and that I think the place is staffed with, and there are professors there who want new ideas. And again, there's not always the space for it, there's not always the budget for it, there's not always whatever that can make new ideas succeed, but there is a willingness, I think, to hear it. And so I try to bring it to bear. So for instance, right now in the pandemic, I'm leading an enrollment marketing team that is looking at some of the challenges associated with basically filling a new class this fall in spite of the pandemic. And so one of the things that we're looking at is what's new, what's innovative that we can try, that we can institute, what can we put into place that isn't just business as usual, because these times are not business as usual. And so we cannot just keep going about things the way that we always have and expect ourselves to succeed when so many things are different than they were just a month ago. And so, I think practically speaking, I'm leading a team right now where I'm being asked to do that, and not just told, hey, we need you to maintain or we need you to manage or whatever else, but I'm being asked for ideas, and I'm being asked for new ways of going about things that can project William and Mary forward even in a time of uncertainty.
That's awesome. Wow. Very cool. I love that. Do you feel that you talked about how those ideas, like you're encouraged to share your ideas, and you feel like you're in a position where people want to hear from you and want to hear what people come up with, and there's always room to hear new ideas. So how integral is listening to fostering creativity where you're working or in your venture?
It's very integral for two reasons. One is I think you have to be open to other people's ideas, and there's a humility that has to come with being creative and being entrepreneurial, and that there has to be a willingness to hear the ideas of other people. And in a way, it's I think ironic and hypocritical for you to believe in your own ideas so much that you're not willing to listen at all to other people. Because if you yourself have compelling ideas, then it only stands to reason that other people do as well. And, you know, they're not always going to be relevant ideas for what you're doing. They're not always going to be helpful ideas. But I think the willingness to listen, and not just the willingness, but the initiative to go and listen on purpose and gather ideas and hear from other people is absolutely integral. And I'd say just from a standpoint of gathering the best ideas. But in addition to that, every business venture is built on the successful nurturing of relationships, and relationships are not nurtured without mutual listening. And you have to be able to listen to people around you, and you have to be willing to let people feel heard and feel like you are incorporating some of their feedback and some of their ideas. And again, that's a life skill, not just an entrepreneurial skill. You know, that's a you know, for those students listening who aren't married yet, if you want a successful marriage, someday you've got to learn to listen. And, you know, for those who are wanting to build a business, you have to learn to listen to other people, because people need to feel heard in order for a relationship to thrive. And so I think it's also important just from that standpoint of it makes for successful relationships when there's an honest listening, and not just a hearing, but a true listening where you seek to understand and you seek to hear the heart behind what somebody's trying to tell you.
Very cool. I love that. Yeah. That's also a common theme with a lot of our guests, is that these are skills not just for entrepreneurship, but also for life, which is, you know, what we try to show entrepreneurial community and what they're constantly showing us. So thank you for pointing that out as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as a reminder, if you're just joining us now because of our several technical glitches, my bad, then you can feel free to throw your questions in for Justin through the comments, and we'll pick some out at the end of the conversation to share. Yeah, and with that, I'll ask you maybe one of our final questions from me, which is, if you were to advise someone who was in your position, maybe your 20-year-old self graduating William & Mary at that time, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I think the advice that I would give is to try to, I think, diversify efforts, in the sense that, you know, I realize there's to a certain extent, there's a desire for people to, if they have a business idea or they have, you know, an entrepreneurial leaning, to just abandon everything and to throw themselves completely into that effort. And I think there's a patience that's required, where, because the reality is that we all need to make money at some point to live on. And how do you do that while also nurturing a dream, while also trying to push something forward? And, you know, something that I've done is, you know, William & Mary, or sorry, Color Outside is 5 years old this August. And I've never been fully in one boat or the other, in the sense that the whole time I've kind of been doing two things at once and investing my time in two things at once. And those dynamics shift from year to year. You know, some years I'm spending a whole lot more time, you know, with William & Mary, and some years a little bit less, and focusing a little bit more effort on my company and that sort of a thing. And, you know, but making sure that I don't just, I think, put all my eggs in one basket, but that I've got connections, and I have enough presence in enough worlds to see one thing through if another thing fails. Does that make sense? And so, in the sense that, you know, and I think it's, if you have the resources and you have the backing, whether it's help from a family member, or you know, you're just able to live in a season of life where you can lower your expenses. You know, I've got 3 children, and when I started Color Outside, I had 3 children, and so I did not have the luxury of saying, hey, I can just go, you know, live in a cheap apartment somewhere and just give everything I have to this business effort, because I'm taking care of other humans. So, you know, for me, it was a little bit different, where I needed to make sure that there was support for my loved ones, but at the same time, I was able to nurture a dream and be able to pursue starting a business. And so I think, you know, if you have the luxury and the privilege of being able to invest everything that you have into an effort, that's great. But if you don't, I think there's nothing wrong with being able to sort of kind of be invested in a few different worlds at one time, and then just allowing that marriage to happen for as long as it'll happen, and then pursuing things as opportunities will open up. So I've done that for 5 years now, and it's not always easy, and it makes for long days sometimes. You know, in the earliest days, I was up 3 nights a week till 2, 3 in the morning. You know, because I was working full time at William & Mary, and then I would spend time with my family, and then at 9 o'clock at night, I'd, you know, say goodnight to them, and then I'd go and work for 4 or 5 hours, you know. And so I don't do that anymore. But I think being okay with that, because for a long time I felt like this, you know, this isn't what I want it to be because I can't give myself fully to it. But I've learned to kind of be okay with there being the presence of multiple efforts in my life at once.
Wow, that's truly incredible. Congratulations on almost 5 years. That's incredible.
Thanks. Yeah, we're proud of it. We're excited.
Wow, awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. Now we'll go to some audience comments. Let's see. All right, so we have one question, I think from Max. Can you give some advice on how we can increase our tolerance for ambiguity at William & Mary? So I think while at William & Mary.
While at William & Mary?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if you're a student at William & Mary, I would encourage you to take classes that are, you know, take a lot of non-quantitative classes. I think I took lots and lots of seminars and, you know, small classes where they focused more on training your mind than they did on getting you to have a knowledge set at the end of the class. And I think the more you can take classes like that, the better, in the sense that it allows you to be okay knowing that I'm graded and my performance is graded on my ideas right now and how I articulate them, not necessarily on whether or not it's the right answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, so I took seminars in the government department. I took seminars in economics. I took lots of seminars in philosophy. I took seminars in religious studies. And so I think taking more and more seminars is great. And William & Mary is a school where you have the opportunity to take, there's a lot of seminar offerings. And so I think the more you can take some of those smaller classes, and, you know, the great thing is that I think the lion's share of classes at William & Mary are fewer than 35 students anyways. But I loved taking classes that were like 12, 13 students in the class. And I think that you just have an opportunity for your thoughts to be challenged, and then for you to challenge other people's ideas. And, you know, I think that builds up that tolerance for ambiguity.
Awesome. Great advice. All right, here, let's do another one. Let's see. What advice would you give to a senior who is seeking a job, specifically a creativity position?
So one piece of advice is, and I've looked at lots and lots of resumes at William & Mary and at Color Outside for young professionals who are trying to get into creative positions. And you know, it's different. At Color Outside, we have the fortune of being able to kind of expedite some of those, you know, efforts and be able to just talk among a small group of a couple of us. At William & Mary, it's a little different. Every position is hired by a hiring committee. And I think when you're dealing with larger organizations, that's generally how it is they'll go through hiring committees. And so you can't just win one person over. You have to win several people over. And they're usually thinking about it from different perspectives. And so, you know, what I see most often is I see for people who are trying to get design jobs and creative jobs is their entire portfolio is built out of projects from when they were in school. And if you're trying to get a job simply on projects when you're in school, you're going to have a hard time doing that. And so I think there's two ways that people who are trying to enter the job market in a creative field can kind of build up their portfolios where it's going to be more compelling to a hiring committee or to somebody who's going to hire them. And one is to just take on fake projects and hypothetical projects. And so, you know, you can say, hey, I think, you know, Coca-Cola could really do with a rebrand on this facet of their business. And so I'm going to concept that out, and I'm going to design some things, and I'm going to put together some mock-ups and some wireframes for a new website and, you know, put this all together. and just kind of display that as a portfolio item on my own personal website. And so I think that's one way to build that out. Another option is to do some select, and I want to emphasize that word select, pro bono work for people, because nobody, I don't believe in giving my time away for free. But at the same time, when you're inexperienced and maybe don't have the connections yet, you may need to a little bit on the front end and consider a time invested in trying to get a job, down the road. And so, when I was first starting out, I would do some projects for free just so I could show portfolio items to people and say, this was actual work done for an actual client of mine, and here's how it came out. And so being willing to do some of that work was rounded out my portfolio, made me more compelling as a job candidate. So I would make those two recommendations.
Very cool. All right, got one more. All right, this one is a little small. Let's see. So it says, hi, thank you so much for your time. Can you comment on how you stay constantly motivated while pursuing, let's see, so-called I can't read the end of that question, but let's see if I can get it. All right. Well, for the person who sent that question, if you could send that again in the comments, and I can see if I can read it all from there, and I'll come back to it if we have time. Otherwise, I'll be sure to maybe send that in Slack or something like that later. But for now, let's focus. Let's get this other one, which just says, what is the most challenging part of your job?
Oh man. I'd say it's different at William & Mary from my job with Color Outside. I think the most challenging part of my work with Color Outside is, I would say, the notion that, and it's a double-edged sword, it's the notion that I can make it into anything I want it to be. And that is really, really cool some days. And then some days I wake up and that's absolutely terrifying, because I realize there's nobody higher than me saying, hey, this is what you need to do today, and this is your measure for success. And if you do this today, you can put your head on the pillow knowing that today was a successful day. That is not present at all in entrepreneurship. It's not present at all at Color Outside. And so I have to constantly redefine and remind myself what my standard for success is in that company. And that's a constant struggle. And it's because I can go to bed some days and feel like, I didn't do anything today, or today was not a successful day because I didn't move the needle on something. We didn't sign a new contract today. We didn't do this today. And you have to redefine that for yourself. And for somebody, if you're like me, where I get a lot of personal sense of fulfillment out of achievement and achieving things, that can be really, really frustrating, because you're going about life trying to achieve things, and yet it can be days and weeks and even months before you feel like you can actually show something that is the result of your efforts. And so I would say that's one of the hardest parts about my job at Color Outside is that kind of just emotional struggle a little bit. At William & Mary, I'd say the most challenging part of it is, I would say it's people management. And not because the people are, William & Mary is an organization that I think across the board has incredible people, but because it is so historic, and because there are so many traditions, and because there are so many different audiences and demographics that you're dealing with, it's getting things done can sometimes seem like it just takes way too long. And so you have to embrace the life of diplomacy. You have to embrace the life of, or you have to embrace a certain pace of decision making and getting things done. And one of the cool things, one of the silver linings about the pandemic right now is William & Mary's in this place of really agile decision making, where they have a very clear set of priorities because of the challenges the pandemic has introduced. and everybody across traditional lines and silos within the organization are having to break those things down and say, we're going to, you know, make some progress this week together. And so there's a pace of decision making that's there right now that I've never seen in working there 12 years. And so,
Wow.
you know, but outside pandemic circumstances, that pace is much, much slower. And being able to still build relationships and still move the ball down the field and still be able to make progress in your job is that's a lot more challenging in normal times.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. All right, so we have the end of the question. Thank you so much for commenting again. So the question reads, how do you stay motivated while pursuing a so-called non-practical major at college?
I think if it's so non-practical major, so I'll assume that person's talking about majors like philosophy or sociology or psychology or English or some of these other ones that are not traditionally associated with lucrative careers. So I'll make that assumption, and that person can jump in and comment if they're referring to something else. I think the way you stay motivated is you ensure that whatever you're studying is something you enjoy. And if you are studying a non-practical career that you don't enjoy, you should stop going to school right now and go do something else with your life. Because not only is it non-practical, but it's also not something that you enjoy doing. And I think you need to get out of there. But if it's non-practical and you do enjoy it, I think sometimes it's just the nature of the coursework that gets you through and keeps you motivated. And so, you know, for me, I liked philosophy enough that I wanted to, you know, I didn't despise my work. I didn't love all my coursework. I didn't do all my coursework. You know, I joke with people all the time. I say, if you do all the homework that's assigned to you at William & Mary, you will have no life whatsoever. You know, I have yet to meet somebody that has done 100% of what they've been assigned at William & Mary, just because it's crushingly impossible to do it all and to do it all well. And so I think that making sure that it's something you enjoy, if you're going to major in something that is traditionally thought of as not very practical, it is absolutely essential that you enjoy it, and that'll get you through. But if you don't, you need to change something up.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for everybody who joined us today and hung with us during our technical difficulties. Justin's insights were so worth it. So I'm so glad you joined us. Justin, thank you so much for giving your time today.
Of course. You're welcome. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, good luck with all the work you're doing. I know you're working hard, you know, through this crazy situation. And to entrepreneurial community, we'll see you next Monday for our AFS, and tune into Rocket Pitch this Friday at 2 p.m.
Sonia, can I just offer one last thought, if that's all right?
Oh, please, yes.
Yeah, if there's anybody here who you've got other questions or even just want to talk and want to kick around ideas or anything like that, like, I'm very open to that and always like meeting new people and talking with folks. And so you can email me at justin@coloroutside.com. So I'm absolutely available there and happy to field any more questions or conversation with folks.
Yeah, I will definitely send out Justin's contact information to people who apply or who viewed, so everybody can connect, and it's cool with you. All right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. All right. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone.